The movie opens with the voiceover of a little girl who is terrified of horror stories. She says how her elder sister named Monsi would come to her room to narrate these horrifying tales. She says how she would pretend to sleep to get out of this terrifying ordeal. However, it took her years to find out what Monsi really went through. The scene then shifts to Monsi's mother's funeral. Her father hands her a necklace that belonged to her mother, which was a special gift from her great-grandmother on her wedding day, and told her that it's an old family necklace meant to be passed down. He tells Monsi that her mother would have given it to you herself, but unfortunately, God didn't give her that chance. The scene then shifts back to the present. Monsi is busy in her room, surrounded by her sewing machine and the joyful presence of her beloved sister named Hermana, who has just turned into a beautiful 18-year-old. Meanwhile, a delivery man brings 2 vibrant bouquets. Monsi had ordered one for their mother, who she told her sister passed away on the same day she was born, and the other to celebrate her sister's special birthday. Hermana needs to head out to open the store, and Monsi suggests she take 1 bouquet to the cemetery. As she looks at her elder sister and her mother's picture, her eyes fill with longing. She admits she envies her sister, wishing she too could share those memories with her mother. After a moment, she gets ready to leave and takes the dress from her sister's hand, which is scheduled to be picked up the same day. Monse smiles at her sister, saying how she looks more like their mother, and that she must be very proud of her. As Hermana gets ready to leave for the store, Donna Puri, her regular customer, appears. With a cheerful grin, she wishes her a happy birthday, and hands her some money as a gift to have fun with friends. Donna then gently reminds Monsi, saying her sister is now a woman who deserves a happy and fulfilling life. However, she doesn't want to hear it. As she admires the beautiful dress, Donna praises her talent and encourages her to open a boutique, something Monsi dreams of but feels she can't pursue. She lacks the money and is held back by a fear that keeps her from stepping outside her home. The kind Donna offers her help, mentioning that her husband is a doctor who can assist with Monsi's psychological struggles. She adds that she can be her sponsor. Money is not an issue if she really wants to open her boutique. She encourages her to consider starting right in their spacious flat if she feels too anxious to leave. Grateful but hesitant, Monsi responds by saying she will think about it. This loyal customer also shows her concern about the anxiety attacks Monsi has been experiencing. She retrieves a bottle of morphine she had given her before and explains how it might help. Donna urges Monsi once more to seek treatment if she wants a happy and fulfilling life. Hermana would one day grow up and leave her, so she must think about herself too. This thought hits Monsi hard, increasing her fears of abandonment. With a heavy heart, Donna exits the flat, leaving Monsi alone in her sorrow. Hermana enters moments later, finding Monsi nestled in bed. There is evident sadness on her face while the morphine bottle ominously lies on the side table. Concerned, she asks about Monsi's feelings but receives no response. Sighing, Hermana retreats to the kitchen, where she eats her dinner. There's a cake adorned with happy birthday on it. Meanwhile, back in her room, Monsi was trapped in a whirlwind of hallucinations, her father's harsh voice echoing in her mind, cursing her for not visiting the cemetery. Trembling and shivering, she finally forces herself out of bed, driven by an overwhelming urge to check on her sister. Peering out the window, she is struck with fury when she spots Hermana with a boy. She forcefully yanks the curtains aside. Back downstairs, Hermana gives the boy a sweet goodbye kiss. When she comes back upstairs, she finds Monsi with wild, angry eyes. In a fit of rage, Monsi hits her sister, bruising her face while her own hand bleeds. Shortly after, Monse quickly comes to her senses and asks for forgiveness. In an attempt to feel less guilty, she warns Hermana that men can be dangerous, and that she only hit her for her own good. But, hurt and panicked, Hermana runs out of the flat, trying to escape the chaos and save herself from Monsi's troubled existence. Meanwhile, 2 young men named Carlos and Jaime arrive near the flat and find Hermana sleeping outside. Carlos glances at her and says he wants a girl like her. Jaime quickly points out that she is far too young for him. Ignoring Jaime's argument, Carlos tells him not to act like his mother, always trying to control him. Instead, he focuses on Hermana's vulnerable state and urges Jaime to cover her with a blanket. The next morning, Monsi sits at the table for breakfast, her mood spoiled as she reflects on the mark she left on her sister's face. She shows concern and apologizes, but Hermana doesn't pay much attention and leaves the table. As she walks away, Monsi is hit by a wave of hallucinations and past traumas. She sees her parents at the dinner table, and she approaches them, asking for permission to go outside and for some money to buy things. Her father's harsh words echo in her mind as he refuses her request, insisting that women should not go outside. He makes it clear that her place is at home. Feeling trapped and overwhelmed, Monsi turns to morphine again, desperately seeking relief. Back in her room, she cries out loudly in her bed, the pain of her memories consuming her. In her anguish, she whispers some holy words, praying for solace in a world that feels increasingly dark and confining. The next morning, a heavy knock shakes Monsi from her thoughts. Peeking through the door, she sees Carlos, a neighbor she didn't know lived upstairs. He asks for help, explaining he fell down the stairs and can't move. Initially scared, she hesitates but eventually drags him into her home without stepping outside. Once inside, she quickly grabs a mop to help move his luggage, pulling it in from the doorway. The situation is tense, but her instinct to help takes over as she focuses on getting Carlos settled and safe. She gently helps Carlos into bed, carefully wiping away the blood and changing his clothes, which are soaked with it. Just then, Hermana comes home, asking about lunch. She notices her sister's strange behavior, feeling a sense of worry creep in. After a moment, Hermana decides she needs a shower. While in the bathroom, she spots the towel used to clean Carlos's face. Its stains are still visible. Alarmed, she calls out, and her sister quickly hands her a clean towel. Hermana's concern deepens as the unusual actions continue. In the bedroom, she, once again, discovers Carlos's blood-stained shirt and demands to know what happened. Her sister tries to reassure her, explaining that he is just resting and lives upstairs. But Hermana is not convinced. She presses for answers, feeling an uneasy tension between them. Despite her sister's insistence that she is only helping, Hermana breaks down in tears, feeling overwhelmed. In distress, she rushes to her room, locking the door behind her and sobbing heavily. She is unsure of what is really happening and frightened for her sister's well-being. The next day, she warns her sister not to mention Carlos's presence in their home. Monse insists that if Hermana says anything, she will not let her live in the flat anymore. With a heavy heart, Hermana leaves the flat, heading out for a walk with a friend who waits downstairs. Meanwhile, Carlos wakes up to find Monse there, eager to give him a fresh start to the morning with her sweet behavior. He has no memory of falling down the stairs and is confused about his injuries. She gently informs him that his head is a little hurt and his leg is broken. To ease his worries, she lies, saying a doctor came and prescribed him rest. She shows him his leg, which she tried to fix with a wooden stick and a belt. Seeing the makeshift splint makes Carlos anxious, but he tries to stay calm. He finally introduces himself, thanking her for being so kind and caring. He also shares that he lives by himself. Carlos asks her for a favor, wanting to go to his apartment, but she refuses, explaining that she can't do it and doesn't even have a phone. Instead, she offers him to stay at her flat until he gets better. As she looks in the mirror, her eyes shine with a mix of hope and happiness. It's the first time another man has appreciated her kindness. Meanwhile, Hermana is busy writing in her diary when her sister knocks on the door and walks into the room. She informs her that the man staying with them will live there until he gets better since he's alone. Kissing Hermana on the cheek, she reassures her, emphasizing that she didn't do anything wrong to him. The atmosphere shifts as Hermana absorbs the news, feeling a mix of curiosity and concern about the unexpected situation unfolding in their home. Later, Hermana sneaks into Carlos's room and tells him he might have to go. Otherwise, her sister would take him out for good. He compares Hermana to a shrew, a frightened little creature that hides away in a hurry. Hermana warns him to get out of the flat, insisting that her sister may seem nice but is actually not. As she reaches for the door to escape, Monse comes back inside with a glass of water, making the girl quickly hide. She hands it to Carlos, claiming it's holy water that will help him sleep well. Hermana glances between them, her anxiety growing. She then rushes outside the room, feeling increasingly worried about this man. She knows how her sister is used to morphine and now seems to be giving it to him in the water. Panicked, Hermana runs toward her own room and locks the door behind her. The next morning, Monse adds a few drops of morphine to his breakfast. She then takes a damp towel and rinses his feet. As they sit down to have breakfast, he looks up, curiosity in his eyes. He asks if she lives with someone, prompting her to share about her little sister. He begins to describe her sister's beauty in detail, focusing on every lovely feature. Monse feels a pang of annoyance and interrupts, explaining that she sometimes does inexplicable acts to protect her sister. He praises her for having a good eye for things as they are. She then reveals her painful past, sharing that their mother passed away giving birth to her sister, leaving her with feelings of guilt. When he asks about her father, she quietly admits that she hasn't seen him in 14 years, as he left for the war and never returned. He listens intently, and then shares that his parents are no longer alive, and he manages the property they left him. He lightens the mood by admitting he does silly things sometimes. She watches him as he cleans his hands with the wet towel and asks if he feels better. The man looks at her with grateful eyes, expressing his happiness for all the help she has provided since his injury. Carlos then reaches into his pants pocket and pulls out the keys to his flat. He asks her to help retrieve some books from his place, and offers her the chance to choose any book she likes. The scene shifts, and Monse stands with Donna, in front of a mirror. Donna, who is wearing a new dress made by Monse, beams with happiness. Monse exclaims that she is ready to go for treatment. As her first session begins, Monse consults over the phone with Donna's husband. He motivates her to take just one single step out of the door and stand until she can. It is a horrifying moment for her, where she struggles to breathe and experiences a severe panic attack. That night, while having dinner, she tells her sister about her decision to get treatment and the panic attack she had during the session. Her sister is amazed and a little happy, but not completely satisfied. She knows Monsi is doing this for Carlos. Monsi clarifies that she feels like a complete woman with Carlos. She then hands her sister Carlos's flat keys and asks for help to retrieve some books from his place. Later, as she stands in front of the mirror with sparkling eyes, getting ready, she experiences hallucinations. In these, her father appears, comparing her to a clown and cursing her, saying that this makeup is not for her. On the other side, Hermana gets ready in a beautiful floral dress, feeling both nervous and excited as she heads to see Carlos, who still cannot move on his own. As she sits beside him, he praises her beauty and compliments her dress. She gently removes the blanket from Carlos's broken leg, noticing how it has worsened, the bruising becoming more severe and dark. Concern fills her eyes as she asks why he hasn't left yet, stating that their home isn't a safe place for him. Carlos explains that he was running away when he fell, and that this is the best place to hide. She feels a flicker of fear, but he reassures her, promising that he wouldn't be dangerous to her or her sister. However, he admits he can't tell her more than that. Her worry grows as she cautions him to leave, insisting that Monse isn't good for him. Carlos counters that Monse is looking after him and taking good care of him. In response, Hermana gives him a reality check, asking if Monse has given him a phone since he woke up. Carlos looks puzzled and says that her sister told him they didn't have one. He is shocked to discover that they do have a phone, wondering why Monse lied about it. Suddenly, a sharp pain shoots through his broken leg, and he asks her to call Monse, pleading for the water she used to ease his pain. Hermana listens in shock as she realizes Monse is giving him morphine. She tells him that, in reality, her sister has kidnapped him because she has fallen in love with him. All of a sudden, Carlos begins to shout, calling out for forgiveness from a girl named Elisa. The sound of his desperation sends Hermana running toward her room, anxiety swelling inside her. Monse, hearing the commotion, hurries from her room and rushes to Carlos's side, offering him a few sips of water. She looks at him with concern, trying to soothe his panic and confusion. The next morning, Hermana finds some new people on the stairs, climbing up as they search for someone. She passes them, feeling uneasy, but continues on her way to work. Meanwhile, Monse prepares breakfast for Carlos, adding another dose of morphine to his meal. Later, while talking to Donna, Monse confides that she has been experiencing more panic attacks lately and needs an extra dose this time. Donna warns her that this isn't possible and could be dangerous. However, Monse insists, promising that she will make the dress for her free of cost. Just then, there's a knock at the door. Monse hangs up the phone and opens the door to find a few men asking about Carlos. She denies knowing anything, but they step inside to check the flat. After a brief look around, they leave, advising her to ask her sister if she has noticed anything odd in the past few days. From the window, Monse spots Hermana with a boy, and a sense of dissatisfaction washes over her. Once again, Hermana appears worried as she opens the door to Carlos's flat and steps inside. On the other hand, Monse enters the room, her heart racing. She tells Carlos that there is a lot to share about herself, revealing many bad things she has kept hidden. She confesses her love and affection for him, feeling vulnerable, yet determined. Carlos listens, his expression unreadable. He then says that if she really likes him, she should call a doctor. Monse, feeling cornered, lies again, saying the doctor came, but this time, Carlos gets offended. He snaps, calling her a liar, his frustration bubbling over. He demands to know if she truly wants him. Does she want him to pass away, or be a cripple for life? The tension hangs heavy in the air as Monse grapples with her feelings, her words clashing against the harsh reality of their situation. Carlos's pain and anger intertwine with her desperation. She wants to reassure him, but the truth feels out of reach, caught in a web of lies and fear. She tries to comfort him by holding his hand, but he quickly snatches it away. He says he wants to go outside from this house alive and not sick like her. She leaves the room with teary eyes. On the other hand, Hermana didn't know that there was someone else in Carlos's flat as well. A girl finds Hermana and asks about Carlos. She turns out to be Elisa. Hermana tells her that Carlos is at her place. Hearing this, the woman's next question catches her off guard when she asks if she is his girlfriend. Before Hermana can answer, the girl rushes away, clearly searching for someone important. Her determination is unmistakable as she runs downstairs toward Hermana's flat, desperate to find the man who was once supposed to marry her before he disappeared without a word. In another room, Monse leans against the wall, tears streaming down her face. She's consumed by hallucinations again, her father's cruel words echoing in her mind that she's worthless. His voice drips with disdain in her mind. Not even a cripple would want her. These harsh words cut deep, reminding her of her deepest insecurities. He calls her a coward, twisting the knife even further. Suddenly the doorbell rings. Monse wipes her tears, her heart racing. At the door is Elisa, her face flushed with anger. She storms into the flat, shouting Carlos's name, her voice filled with fury. Monse tries to stop her, but Elisa is relentless, charging through the flat until she finds the man she once planned to marry. Monse, overcome by her emotions, snaps. She strikes Elisa on the neck, taking her out instantly. In a trance-like state, Monse drags Elisa's lifeless body. Carlos, still in bed, is frozen with fear, unable to utter a single word. The psychopath he's trapped with is ready to take anyone's life who threatens her fragile world. Carlos, drenched in Elisa's blood, tries to crawl away, desperate to escape the horror unfolding around him. But Monse is far from done. She retrieves a large saw and, without hesitation, begins cutting Elisa's to pieces. Carlos, too weak to fight back, is dragged back to his bed, trembling in fear. Meanwhile, Hermana, oblivious to the gruesome events downstairs, finds something unsettling. She stumbles across Elisa and Carlos's wedding invitations. The realization hits her hard, and she leaves his flat, returning to her own. But something nags at her. The flat feels off, like something dark lingers within its walls. All of a sudden, her sister comes, confessing that she needs to share something from her past, unable to keep it in anymore. She reveals the haunting truth. After their mother's demise, their father physically abused Monse because she resembled their mother. Monse was powerless to stop him. She would tell her dark stories every night, hoping to make her sleep early and drown out the sounds coming from their father's room. One night, she saw their father enter her little sister's room, and fear gripped her. That was the night she poisoned him, putting an end to the nightmare. Hearing this, Hermana is overwhelmed with disbelief and anger. She screams at Monse, devastated that her sister had lied to her their entire lives. Later that night, Hermana visits Carlos, determined to get answers. She finds him with tears in his eyes, his voice heavy with guilt and sorrow. He confesses that Elisa was pregnant with his child, and his family had pressured him to marry her. That's why he had been running. With a heavy heart, he says he doesn't know what Monse has done to Elisa. His pain is visible, but it worsens when he removes the blanket from his leg, revealing a horrific sight. Monse has stitched his leg to the bed cover. Hermana, after watching this horrible scenario, rushes out of the room. Next morning, Monse enters the room, her fingers grazing Carlos's leg, tracing the stitches with disturbing tenderness. Carlos, fighting back tears, tells her how deeply she has disappointed him. But before he can say more, there's a knock on the door. Monse warns him to stay silent as she answers it. It's Donna and her niece. They are there to collect the wedding dress Monse has been working on. Donna thanks her, but Monse demands morphine in exchange for finishing the dress. All of a sudden, from Carlos's room, a faint cry for help escapes. Monse rushes in, beating Carlos brutally until he faints. Meanwhile, Donna's niece discovers the horrifying dress which is displayed on a headless body. The niece screams in fear, and Monse, now fully unhinged, realizes that they know too much. In a blind panic, she takes out both of them with large knitting needles, hitting them repeatedly. Hermana, who was out, returns to the flat and finds her sister drenched in blood. Horrified, she races to Carlos's room, where he begs her for help. Meanwhile, Monse, spiraling further into madness, demands morphine, desperate to maintain her hold on reality. Hermana locks her sister in a room, hoping to protect Carlos. She runs towards him, opens all the stitches and drags him towards the door. Meanwhile, Monse, plagued by hallucinations of their father, smashes through the door, fueled by rage and delusion. She attacks Carlos again, mercilessly beating his leg while Hermana fights to stop her. In the chaos, Hermana pushes Monse to the ground, her hand trembling as she contemplates ending her sister's rage and suffering. But she can't bring herself to do it. Monse, battered and broken, reveals one final secret. She has a photograph of their mother, a picture Hermana had always longed for. Monse takes her sister to the place where their father's body was hidden and hands her the photograph, showing a baby girl smiling in her mother's arms. As Hermana carries Carlos out of the flat, they share a brief tender kiss, a fragile sign of hope amidst the horror. She leaves him outside her door, finally free from the nightmare, and the movie ends.